They're sitting on 10 to 12 trillion dollars of critical minerals in Ukraine. They could be the richest country in all of Europe. I don't want to give that money and those assets to Putin to share with China. If we help Ukraine now, they can become the best business partner we ever dreamed of. That 10 to 12 trillion dollars of critical mineral assets could be used by Ukraine and the West.
Guys, welcome to Better Bachelor. My name is Joker with a face for radio and a voice for print. Before we get started, if you guys like me doing these news segments and sharing things other than the usual girls are crazy, girls are nonsense, girls behaving badly kind of stuff, give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up and a like on the video. Let me know that you like this content. If you don't and you want me to keep doing the ladies bad and staying out of, news and world politics, hit the thumbs down. That's a very easy way to give me feedback and letting me know if you like this content or not. Because, again, this is about the only content other than The Acolyte from Disney's new Star Wars movie. Other than that being bad, it's kind of a slow news on the woke front. It's mostly kind of some more serious stuff going on right now. And me personally, I think this is more pertinent to what is going to be changing our lives for the worse. So when I made this thumbnail, I wasn't sure if I would label it war or war ? Because it's certainly hard to say a statement when more, shouldn't this be a question? Are we going to be going off to war soon? Are we going to get into another world war? But the way things are proceeding as it is, I actually kind of think, yes, we're in a Cold War right now. And of course, we're in a culture war. But we might actually get into a hot war with Russia and furthermore with China. Because right now, Russia is pretty much circumnavigating all the tariffs and the impositions that the West has put on them by selling things to China, by selling them to India, and then India turning around and China turning around and then selling them to other countries. So you in the West, even though they said, we're not going to buy any Russian LNG, natural gas, or we're not going to buy any petroleum from Russia, screw them. Russia sells it to China, China sells it to Europe, and the same thing. They sell it to India, and India sells it to Europe. Now you're just paying twice as much. Russia's still getting paid, and your money's going towards middlemen now. But I think because of the most recent events and everything that I hear on the TV, I think war is almost a certainty at this point. China just recently did a quote-unquote practice, a naval exercise, where they surrounded Taiwan and they encapsulated it with a blockade. Now, they didn't do it for very long, but they were just testing, and they're testing the waters to see what the United States response is. So far, the United States response is, let's put up more LGBTQ AAI2+ flags for the Rainbow Coalition and yell because kids on scooters are leaving skid marks on crosswalks that are rainbow flags. That's really what we're arguing about right now. So I think Russia looks at our leadership, and China, they're looking at our leadership and they say, these guys are weak. They're idiots. Now's the time to make our move, and we're going to shove them off of this whole Ukraine thing. And one of the things that this has been floating around, and you can say this is fake news. I don't know anymore. Maybe this is propaganda, but there's some very old gentlemen in this photo, seemingly 50, 60 years old, although these are Ukrainians and maybe Russians, so they're probably closer to the age of 30, even though they look like this. And what they're saying is that these are the recruits that they're now using in the Ukrainian conflict, Ukrainian war, because they've run out of young men, or the young men refuse to fight, or they've fled the country, or something. But Ukraine is not doing very well. And because of this, we've already started talking about maybe putting in an automatic draft here in the United States. You don't hear that very much in the news, but they're talking about putting in the automatic draft. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can pull up that article while I think about it. Here's the story here. Congress is weighing automatic registration for a wartime draft. Registration for selective service is already mandatory, but a new proposed law will automatically sign up men between 18 and 25 years old for national draft roles. This is from May 29th, just 11 days ago, 12 days ago. So they're very serious about this. And then when you hear Lindsey Graham, one of our senators, scumbag Republican Lindsey Graham, a warmonger, when you listen to his thoughts about why we're going to be probably putting boots on the ground from the United States, surprise, surprise. Hold on to your hats, guys. This is going to shock you. It's about money. It's all about money. Now, initially, when I guessed what they were going to do, what Europe and the United States was going to do with all these illegal migrants, is to send them to Ukraine, because once Ukraine, quote unquote, wins the war, they'll have to rebuild. And so, of course, all of our military industrial complexes, plus Raytheon, well, including Raytheon, plus Vanguard, plus BlackRock, they'll have to spend and be paid by our government hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars to rebuild Ukraine. And while they're doing that, they'll have all these jobs, and they'll need to replace all these young men that have died in war. They'll have to replace them all. And so they'll make farmers out of them, because Ukraine's got some of the most fertile soil in the world. I thought that was initially what it was. But it come to find out, instead of blood for oil, like we did in Iraq and Iran with the lie that was September 11th, 2001, now it's going to be blood for lithium and nickel and cobalt to kind of help out our new Green New Deal. Because, gosh forbid, we give these resources to Russia and ergo China. And Lindsey Graham kind of gives that away in this segment of an interview from Face the Nation. I want you to hear what he says, because basically what he's said is we are sacrificing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian men so that we can make sure we can make some money. That's basically what he's saying.
What did Trump do to get the weapons flowing? He created a loan system. They're sitting on $10 to $12 trillion of critical minerals in Ukraine. They could be the richest country in all of Europe. I don't want to give that money and those assets to Putin to share with China. If we help Ukraine now, they can become the best business partner we ever dreamed of. That $10 to $12 trillion of critical mineral assets could be used by Ukraine and the West, not given to Putin and China. This is a very big deal, how Ukraine ends. Let's help them win a war we can't afford to lose. Let's find a solution to this war. But they're sitting on a gold mine to give Putin $10 or $12 trillion of critical minerals that he will share with China is ridiculous.
Oh boy, don't you love it when our government accidentally tells us the truth? It's all about the money. It's not about stopping Putin because he's invading a country that we want to be part of NATO. It's not that he's taking over a country that, because of its citizenry, we want to protect the citizens and they should have the right to be free. No, it's none of that. It's about the money. And he just flat out says it. $12 trillion worth of minerals. And you know that if Ukraine gets turned into dirt and then the United States rebuilds them, they're going to go in. That's why they're so eager to spend billions of dollars. What's $100 billion when we stand to make $12 trillion? And so they just basically come clean and they say, hey, you know what? We got to win this war, and then we're going to go in and be business partners with Ukraine, which means the United States will likely milk Ukraine dry. We'll keep 90% of it, 95% of it. The well-to-dos and the upper crust of Ukraine will get to keep 5%, and the people will probably get to keep basically nothing. And if you don't think that's the way it's going to go, I got a Kuwait to sell you. I mean, this is the way that these things go. And our government's basically saying that. So everybody that flew those little Ukrainian flags and saying, oh, you know, we got to make sure that Russia doesn't take, it's all about the money. They're putting these men into a meat grinder just so we can get our hands on these minerals. And what do the minerals have to do? It's going to be for solar panels and electric cars and green infrastructure and all this other stuff. Because that's where the ideology of our government is. And once again, we're going off to war, and they want to spill probably Americans' blood as well as Europeans over money. That's what this all boils down to. So why do I think this is going to happen? Well, I think, number one, it's going to happen because America really wants that $12 trillion worth of assets. It's going to make a lot of people very, very rich, a lot of companies very, very rich. I mean, that's half of our national debt. That is an amazing amount of money when you really think of it. And they're scared to death that if Russia and China get that, they will be the next global powers. And it's true, they probably will be. But will they? I don't know. Will they be that much worse than we're being right now? This is from menafn.com. And just recently, the United States has given Ukraine long-range missiles. And it's not to defend themselves. It's to attack deep into Russia. And again, this is just from a week ago or so. And now Ukraine's starting to strike deep into the heart of Russia. But here's what's interesting. Their attack targets. What are the Ukrainians attacking? Well, they say right here, on May 23rd, drones launched from Ukraine hit a Russian strategic radar station in Armavir, Russia. This is not the first time that nuclear facilities in Russia have been targeted and hit, but it represents a significant escalation that could trigger Russian retaliation on NATO suppliers or even a nuclear response by Russia. The core of Russian angst about Ukraine is that the country would become a NATO base for nuclear missiles. It isn't clear if the attack was entirely on Ukraine's initiative or whether Ukraine's NATO partners were involved. Here's the thing that freaks me out a little bit. It consists of 2 long-range phased array radars for warning of a nuclear attack. The site is in southern Russia in Krasnodar Krai and is on the grounds of Baranovsky Air Base situated there. One of the radars covers the southwest and the other faces southeast. This radar site replaces earlier strategic radar sites in Ukraine that were abandoned around 2012 and another no longer operational in Azerbaijan. What is the point for, if this is just a conflict across the border, if this is just a small, I mean, it's a war, obviously, but if the United States isn't really involved and we're just, we're just giving Ukraine supplies, but we're not directing their attacks, why would they attack a nuclear radar site when Ukraine doesn't have any nukes? So if you think about this, okay, Russia's fear is the United States is going to put nukes in Ukraine. And back in the Cuban Missile Crisis, the United States wanted to put nukes in Turkey. And both times Russia said, no, that's too close. Or if you're going to do that, fine, we're just going to put nukes in Cuba. We're just going to put some on your doorstep. And we had this huge standoff in the 1960s. And it was the Missile Cuban Crisis. And it was a very scary time. And here, now all of a sudden, Ukraine's going after Russian radar that detects a weapon that Ukrainians don't have. They say US B-52 bombers, F-22 and F-35 aircraft, and the new long-range B-3 strike bomber are stealth platformers and are all nuclear mission capable. So now by taking out the radar stations, now they're saying, hey, Russia has 10 strategic radars to protect the country. Will you stop with the pop-ups? Jeez. Sorry. I got this little pop-up that keeps popping up here, distracting me. They say Russia has 10 strategic radars to protect the country. These radars date from 2017. They have a range of about 6,000 kilometers or 3,700 miles and are known as Vorozhen. I almost sound like a Klingon there for a second. Vorozhen. The radars are designed to detect cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and attacks from space. These radars are linked to the new S-500 air defense system and other air defenses. The drones fired at the radar flew 1,800 kilometers. This is well beyond Ukraine's surveillance capabilities. Although the radar sites could have been located through commercial satellite imagery, the locations of Russia's strategic radar sites are public information. And they partially destroyed AR-3 drone Armavir. So this is a huge escalation by the United States. Well, shortly after this is just from 4 days ago, Russia now has officially declared the U.S. an enemy, or an enemy state, for the first time amid straining ties over Ukraine. They said amid straining ties with our Washington over Ukraine, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov called the United States an enemy state. Russian President Vladimir Putin's press secretary Peskov's remarks come after former American intelligence officer Scott Ritters claimed that he was prevented from visiting St. Petersburg and his passport was confiscated by border officials. Responding to it, Peskov told reporters that the latest manifestation of rabid campaign to stop Americans from communicating with Russia would be only understandable if the move had any connection to his former alliance status. We are now an enemy country for them, just as they are for us, he told reporters. According to Agentstov, a reputable Russian investigative website, neither Peskov nor Putin have ever referred to the United States other than unfriendly countries as Russia's enemies. So now you've got basically Russia saying, look, we see you're helping Ukraine. We know you're giving them aid. We know they've got tanks of yours. We know that you're sending people over there to help them fire some of these missile batteries that they have no training on, and it takes 10 months to train these guys, yet somehow they're magically getting fired. So we know you've got people in the country firing on us. You're now officially an enemy. And because of the way that you're helping Ukraine attack us, we basically are looking at you as the aggressors through Ukraine, because now they see what's going on. It'd be no different. It'd be no different than what would be a good example if China was at war or fighting Mexico to get right on our doorstep, here's a better way to put it. It'd be like China is entering Mexico into like a NATO, like an alliance, and then they're going to put nukes in Mexico right on our doorstep. The Americans would be like, no way, that's not going to happen. We are not going to allow that. Well, that's what's going on with Russia right now. And so Putin's like, look, we know what's going on. This is war, and it's game on. And they've responded in the last 24 hours. They say Russian warships, including nuclear sub and a missile frigate, will arrive in Cuba next week. Well, I got news for you. That was 3 days ago. Ta-da, they're here. They just arrived. So now we have Russian naval ships, nuclear-powered submarines, probably some of which are nuclear capable, or they have these hypersonic missiles that can have a range as far as South Carolina in the United States from Cuba, which puts all of Florida, the east coast of Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama. That puts a lot of states in range of an attack from them. They say 3 Russian Navy ships and a nuclear-powered submarine will arrive at Port of Havana for an official visit next week. The Cuban Armed Forces said in a statement Thursday, confirming the military exercise first disclosed by U.S. officials on Wednesday. The Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces said the Russian missile frigate Admiral Gorshkov, the nuclear sub Kazan, the oil tanker Pashin, and the salvage tug Nikolai Chiker will arrive on June 12th and stay for a week. The Cuban military said the visit by the Russian Navy ships is part of the friendly relations between the two countries. Complies with international law, does not pose a security threat to the region because none of the ships carry nuclear weapons. Okay. So let's put a pin in that. Okay? They might be technically correct. The 3 Russian Navy ships and the submarine that are coming, that they've announced that are visiting, they may not be nuclear capable. However, the 6 submarines that might have been following right along with these ships or following underneath the ships, so you can't detect them on radar or sonar for that matter. Maybe they can. I don't know. But who says they don't have something in them? Who says they don't have stealth-type subs? Who says they're not just coming in and getting a feel for things or dropping some things off? It's something to think about, and it's something to worry about, that you now have China doing exercises around Taiwan. I think they know Biden isn't capable. I think China's going to make a move before our elections. I'm pretty sure that's going to happen right around the time of our elections, because it'll be chaos, number one. Number two, if he makes it a big enough deal, he knows the Democrats are going to use this as a reason to postpone elections, because now we're in a wartime situation, which means Trump does not get elected. It means President Potato Head stays in there as the commander-in-chief. All around, that is a win for China. It's also a win for Russia. And how is the United States, with their arrogance and their cockiness, how are they going to respond? I think at this point, the United States hasn't admitted it yet. But I think, when you get into these, this is supposedly the fourth turning, I think when you get into it, with the drone technology and how quickly things have changed, with the capabilities of our current services, which they're not on their A game. We can say that much by just looking at recruiting and the shortfall of people that are, that they're trying to recruit, and we're falling short. Every branch of the military is falling short by 20 or 30,000 recruits every year, which is, across all of our military, 100,000 recruits every year. We're falling short on that. Our commander-in-chief is absolutely la-la. He's not the one running the show. Our generals and commanders are more worried about what pronouns they use in emails. And I think the other thing that's important to remember is that the United States is beholden to China for too many things. Steel, China. Aluminum, China. Medicines, China. 95% of the United States medicine we get from China. And we have updated our infrastructure so that China and Russia will be able to hack and probably shut down much of our water and our electric infrastructure. So while we're worried about Taiwan, and we're worried about Ukraine, and we're worried about our southern border, and we're worried about President Potato Head, and we're worried about our infrastructure getting shut down, and we're worried about our economy, it's too many weaknesses or too many holes in the dam for us to shore up all at once. And I think China and I think Russia know this. They're not stupid. Because if I can see this, they can see this. If a dummy out in the middle of the woods is looking at this and saying, we've got our fingers in way too many pies, our economy is too weak, and here's the other thing. We've had 20 or 30,000 just this year alone, 20 or 30,000 Chinese young fighting age males come across the southern border. What happens if there's, 1,000, 5,000 of them that are still members of the party? And they've been trained in taking pressure cookers and fertilizer and making devices. And all of a sudden now they're running all over the place, blowing stuff up and freaking out the public. We're not ready for this. We're not ready for this at all. And I think China knows it, and I think Russia knows it, but I don't think the West and I don't think the United States knows it. They're too cocky, and they're too, I don't know, they're too cocky for all this. They have no idea all the weaknesses we have right now, and the number one factor, honestly, is the economy. Because if this kicks off and all of a sudden all these products we can't get in the United States anymore because they came from China, and there's no more medicine, and your infrastructure is getting shut down, and crazies are running around blowing things up, how long do you think that the American government is going to have the will of the people backing them up to fight? You're going to see a whole bunch of people that were waving those little blue and yellow Ukrainian flags say, okay, just drop it. We're out. You got to stop. And it's all boils down to, like it's always boiled down to, it's all about the money. Except now it's for lithium and cobalt and nickel and really healthy soil. And because if you ask yourself, it doesn't make sense why all these European countries are attacking farmers and trying to shut down farming. Well, they don't need it because they've got Ukraine is the breadbasket of the West. I don't know what percent, they produce some huge percentage of food for the Western countries. So if the governments in cahoots with the United States all of a sudden have control over Ukraine, well, now the governments can become the shareholders of those farms. And now, instead of the farmers in, I don't know, the Dutch, in Deutschland, or that would be Germany, Holland. Instead of the farmers in Holland or Germany or Norway or wherever else they've got farmland, instead of those farmers making money as private individuals, now the government would control the farmland in Ukraine. All the governments would share that land, and the profits would go into the coffers of the governments. It's a scam. It's for money. And nothing has changed. We have not learned a lesson since Vietnam, since South Korea. We haven't learned a lesson. And I think we're going to learn another lesson. And I think it's going to be soon. Probably in the next several months. Definitely before November. I think you're going to see Taiwan go. I think you're going to see things escalate in Ukraine. And I think you're going to see China and Russia prepare to start causing havoc in the United States so that we can't interfere in their grand scheme of things. And I don't hear anybody talking about it. Maybe our intelligence agency know. They know, I'm sure. But does anybody else? Is any of this reaching the average citizen so they can say, we're not doing this? No, knock it off. No, I haven't seen much in the news. Just little things here and there. And then this from the other night, where they're basically saying, yep, we will exchange many, many Ukrainian young men's lives into the meat grinder. And next we're going to send American and Western Europe lives into the meat grinder for that almighty dollar, for that sweet ching-ching. That's what they're going for. Guys, if you like my content, if you like my content, please join me over on betterbachelor.locals.com. Please become a supporter today. It's $5. Content like this does not get monetized. I basically end up doing it for free on Rumble and Locals. So please come over and become a supporter today over at Locals. I would appreciate it. This is the content I think we really need to hear and be discussing at this point in time. Not that Becky's entitled and a brat because, I don't know, because some date didn't buy her what she wanted. That's the way I look at it. All right, guys, I will leave it there. We will see you in the next one.